On first down, they hand off to Marlon Mack. Huge hole, 50-yard line. He's at the 40, still going near sideline. He's at the 10. He's at the 5, and he will score. Touchdown, Marlon Mack. Touchdown, INDY. And again, it's picked off. It's Darius Leonard. Leonard with a second INT, and he's streaking down the near sideline. He's at the 40. He's at the 30. He's at the 20. He's going to go. A pick six for the Maniac. Kenny Moore gets to Deshaun Watson. That's a sack for Kenny Moore. Kenny has a pick and now a sack in the game.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
With the number 34th overall pick in the second round of the 2020 NFL Draft, the Indianapolis Colts select wide receiver from USC, Michael Pittman Jr. He's a 6'4", over 200 pounds wide receiver. He's a guy that 32.5-inch arms, 9.25-inch hands. Andrew, the Colts address an immediate need, the biggest need on offense, arguably the biggest need on their team. What are your thoughts here on the Colts nabbing Pittman there with the second pick in the second round?
I think it's an absolute home run, Cody. I mean, as you said, this is probably the biggest need, not just on offense, but I'd argue over the entire offseason, maybe aside from the three technique at defensive tackle. But Pittman, as you mentioned, is just a 6'4" physical specimen. He's going to go up and catch those 50-50 contested balls that we know Phillip Rivers had a lot of success with Mike Williams there in Los Angeles. He caught 11 touchdowns, I believe, last season for the University of USC, 1,275 yards on 101 catches. I saw some really interesting stats, basically saying that Pittman has one of the more consistent catch rates of all the receivers in this class. This is, as I said, an absolute home run for the Colts.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. He was one of the top guys on the board at wide receiver. I argued Denzel Mims, which you saw, he kind of slid into the mid-second round. But Pittman is a perfect fit for the Colts. You get your big body receiver, 6'4", 223. He's a guy that actually, so, you talk about, I feel like one of the big knocks on the Colts receivers over the past however long outside of T.Y. Hilton has been they can't catch the ball, right? It seems like there's a lot of drop rates amongst the Colts wide receivers, and that's not going to be a problem with Pittman. He was actually sixth in the nation in terms of drop rate, or lack of drop rate, rather. Only dropped 5 passes in his career at USC. Only had a 2.7% drop rate, which is phenomenal for what you're looking for in a wide receiver, especially kind of fitting into the mold of what the Colts are looking for in a wide receiver. And so he's a guy that fits and translates really well to a good size complement to T.Y. Hilton, does everything that you need. Obviously, T. Higgins was taken off the board, the pick before. And so they had been rumored the Colts were either going to get one of those guys, and the Colts end up nabbing the senior Michael Pittman, wide receiver, and now it's the wide receiver core is looking quite a bit better here. You got T.Y. who, if he comes back, we know what a threat he can be everywhere. Michael Pittman now slides in ideally to that number 2 wide receiver position. Obviously, we're going to have to see how he continues to develop here and integrates into this Colts offense. Paris Campbell's coming back, a guy who was a second-round pick last year. So the Colts now have spent 2 second-round picks back-to-back years on wide receivers. You get Zach Pascal back, a guy who was their leading receiver last year. Bring back Marcus Johnson. Maybe Reese Fountain decides to do something. He was making some sounds, some noises at the end of the preseason before he went down with that injury. So there's a lot of things here and a lot of optimism. There should be a lot of optimism now with that Colts wide receiver room. And honestly, the Colts could add another receiver, I feel like. I feel like they may not be done adding receivers. It was such a position that I felt of weakness. And adding Pittman, man, it helps your wide receiver core so much. It helps T.Y. Hilton so much to have a guy that you can, and especially with what the Colts are going to do with Phillip Rivers and this offense, it now gives you a guy that can go up there and get it, a guy who can make contested catches and can out defenders just purely on his side. So overall, really, really like this pick. Andrew, if you had to give this pick a letter grade, what would you give it and why?
Without question, it's an A for me, Cody. I mean, as I mentioned, this was an absolute home run. From what I understand, this was an easy pick for the Colts. The general consensus in the entire room was that they were always going to go Pittman. They were never going to go Denzel Mims. And we'll never know about T. Higgins because he was obviously taken the pick before. But my 1, 2, 3, similar to you, Cody, I was a little high on Mims, but then I noticed more and more things about Pittman and how he was sort of rising up draft boards. And I thought, okay, I think this guy has a chance to be a lot better than Mims. And so I'm just really happy the Colts nabbed him. And I like I said, I give him an A without question.
Yeah. Yeah, I would give it an A as well. And it's interesting because the Colts were one of those teams that was rumored to be open for business in terms of trading down. But you get a guy there like Michael Pittman that's still on the board. You take the best player available. That's what the Colts did. They certainly haven't improved their receiving core tremendously just with this one pick. It'll be interesting to see now as the season, gets into full swing, what kind of impact Pittman can make from day one. Because I honestly think he can make a big impact from day one. I think he's a guy who could be an instant starter. What are you thinking in terms of Pittman's kind of role in this offense potentially here in year one?
I think he can make a major impact. I mean, as I mentioned, you have Phillip Rivers, who just loves to throw those 50-50 balls, which often sometimes, ends in really, really solid, productive plays, and other times not so much. But he had a lot of success, as I mentioned earlier, with Mike Williams back in Los Angeles. The Colts missed this big physical specimen of a receiver in their offense last year because of the Devin Funchess injury. So I think Pittman can come in and be extremely, extremely productive right away. I think he's got a bigger upside in both Mims and T. Higgins just because I think his route tree is a lot more extensive than those two receivers. I also think that Pittman, in terms of his route running, he's more of kind of a yak receiver, if you will, for somebody of his size. He can certainly make plays into the open field, short and intermediate routes, and make plays with the ball in his hand.
Yeah, and you mentioned Devin Funchess. Pittman has the same size as Devin Funchess. He's 6'4", over 220, and he also doesn't have a drop problem. So I think this fits perfectly into what the Colts wanted to do. We saw last offseason they wanted to get a bigger receiver. Well, they finally do that by taking Pittman here, number 34 overall. I'm curious what you guys, our listeners here, what you guys think about this pick. What grade would you give this pick from F all the way to A+? I'm curious about that. But that'll do it for this one. The Colts have some more picks coming up here. It's going to be interesting to see kind of where they go. Do they address the offense? Do they address the defense? It'll just be interesting. So hope you guys keep following us. Hope you love our coverage. It's going to be a fun next couple of days. So for Andrew and myself, thank you guys so much, and go Colts.